Liebe Freunde, liebe Interessierte, ich habe euch ja schon erzählt, dass ich mich in nächster Zeit beschäftigen möchte mit dem Thema, wie werde ich gesund alt? Und ich habe ein fantastisches Buch gefunden und eine fantastische Geschichte. Das Buch ist von Dr. Paul Clayton, das sieht so aus in Deutsch, gibt es auch in Englisch. Und es geht im Wesentlichen darum, dass eigentlich, und das ist logisch nachvollziehbar, denke ich, dass wenn deine Zelle gesund ist und dein Körper aus ganz vielen Zellen besteht, dann bist du eigentlich auch gesund. Und die Frage ist, was kann man tun, damit die Zellen gesund sind? Und darüber sprechen wir heute. Dr. Paul Clayton ist hier und ich bin ihm sehr dankbar, dass er sich die Zeit nimmt. Und den Rest machen wir auf Englisch.
Ich bin auch sehr glücklich, um hier zu sein.
Dankeschön. You speak perfectly German.
Ja, perfekt.
But good news is you understand everything, right?
Yeah, something.
Yeah, that's good. So we just start. First of all, yeah, thank you. I said it already in German. I read this book. And to be honest, I did not understand everything, but I guess the main message I understood. And my first question is, and to be honest, I have a lot of friends, and I know a lot of people who work as doctors or professors. And when I heard the story, I asked them, what is it about? Is it true? Is it a fact? And the funniest thing is, or I don't know even if it's funny, all of them said, yes, true. They all said, yeah, the cell is the basis. And I asked them, why are you not taking care about it? And the answer was pretty much, they all said the same in a little different words. They said, you know, people come to us because they are damaged. They don't come to us, to doctors, and they don't go to pharmacies, and they don't use medicine if they feel good, if they feel healthy. So for me, the most interesting question is, and I want to spread this news in easy sentences, because some of the facts are quite complicated or sound complicated. So I would love you to tell me, what is it about?
Could I answer that question from an angle?
Absolutely. You decide how you answer.
From an oblique angle.
Yeah.
I think that, first of all, you raise a really important point. A lot of my medical colleagues will say, well, what we do is we practice a reactive form of medicine. We wait until people get ill. That is when they become concerned. That is when they seek our advice and assistance. And we give them pharmaceutical products in the main, which have been designed to treat fundamentally the symptoms of the diseases that people come to us with. That's a terrible model. Like many other institutions today, it is actually based on ideas and organizations that have their roots in the late 19th century. And at that time, the major causes of illness and death were infections. And this was the subject of an enormous amount of study by my medical ancestors, very great scientists, all the way through from, the Dutch microscopist von Leeuwenhoek to Ehrlich and Robert Koch, the great German scientists, and then you have the French scientists, Pasteur and Bernard also, my medical heroes, all of these people, wonderful scientists. But between them, they gave us this idea of a magic bullet, a chemical or a compound that was so specific that it could destroy the microbe without harming the man. And this was the birth of the antibiotics, which were extremely effective. And that model became set in stone as the basis for further pharmaceutical developments. We would always look for something specific that would attach itself to a particular receptor, that would inhibit one particular enzyme. And so for 100 years, we have, as I'm speaking on behalf of the medical scientists and the pharmaceutical industry, invented countless billions of Deutschmarks and euros and pounds and dollars in developing ever more specific xenomolecules, synthetic compounds. And we have achieved cures for nothing. The antibiotics really remain the only curative compounds that are in wide use. And you have to ask yourself a question, have we been aiming our guns in the right direction? Is this a very model of specificity? Is that not correct? And it's become very obvious that it's not the right model. We shouldn't be trying to shoot magic bullets at our patients, which is a strategy that creates many innocent victims. The graveyards are full of people that have been killed by the medical profession. What we need instead is to go back not to Louis Pasteur, but to his compatriot and contemporary, Claude Bernard, who gave us the idea of the internal milieu, which was developed by another great scientist, Jeffrey Cannon, an American physiologist who encapsulated the concept of homeostasis. And from that kind of angle, not from the pharmaceutical specificity angle, we can see very clearly that most of the diseases that are important today at the public health level are not caused by a single enzyme or a single receptor or a single pathogen. They're caused by multiple metabolic imbalances, which are driven by multiple nutritional inadequacies. There is no one single cause. There is no one single element that you can neutralize and then cure the patient. There are many, many errors that are taking place. To treat them, we need not just one specific active, but support programs, comprehensive support programs of many different nutrients. And because we're working with compounds that are so safe, we can combine them all. It's a concept called polypharmacy in a way that the pharmaceutical industry can't. The tools they use are really dangerous. We have an approach that, if we are allowed to, will transform the healthcare landscape. What we can do, based on our understanding of public health in the past and in vestigial cultures that still exist today, is to create a situation where we think between 8 and 9 out of 10 cases of these lifestyle conditions simply won't occur. It's a transformation of the entire public health landscape, and it will mean, if we can develop this and roll it out through society, we could close hospitals, we could shut down cancer units, put a lot of doctors out of work and train them to be something much more useful, such as electricians or plumbers. And with the use of these very low-cost and minimally invasive diagnostic tests, we can put into the hands of people a set of tools. Here, test yourself, take a little blood spot, see what your blood chemistry is saying, and if it's in the green, if you have a good result, you don't need us. You don't need intervention. You don't need support. If the needle is in the red, well, that's a problem, or it will become a problem. And here we have some nutrients which we can see will move that needle and then reduce your risk of progressing to the point where you do need healthcare. Now, why do we need to do this? Because we can't afford the current model. The current reactive model is so expensive. The average cost of a new biological drug, the biologics as they call them, I think in America, if you don't have insurance, is the average cost, $220,000 a year. Who can afford that? This is one of the reasons why health problems are the main cause of bankruptcy and homelessness in the United States. So the cost of many of these drugs is increasing. The numbers of people with health care, with diseases of civilization, let's call them, with these chronic conditions, is increasing, and people are developing them at younger and younger ages. So the demand and the cost of healthcare resources is inexorably going up. But in the background, thanks to the idiocy of our political classes and the elites, our economies are being destroyed. So we're at the point of a death cross. Medical costs are going up. The economic potential that we need to support those healthcare costs is disappearing. We need urgently to find a more cost-effective and a kinder way of delivering healthcare to the public. And Pharmac-nutrition has shown already, with 100% certainty, with absolute clarity, that that is the direction that we need to go in.
What I've found out in discussing these with people who at least understood my question about the health of my cell, and they all said, yeah, it is pretty simple, because there is like a sort of olive oil, a special olive oil, and there's some fish oil involved, and if you have these substances, and if you see countries who are eating a lot of that stuff, they are more healthy than others, and there are certain natural substances. I guess also some mentioned cannabis, for example. So there are things in the nature which might help and have also a certain culture. But the pharmaceutical industry is not really interested in pushing these things because it is, with regards to the story they tell to their shareholders or whatever, is not that interesting and not that easy to understand. What I'm after is, because I'm 60, a little over 60, and I know a lot of people who are scared to death that they will get older and not stay healthy. So we do sports, we try to, eat healthy stuff, but to be honest, it's not really working every day.
It's not working at all.
I do my best, but you're absolutely right, it's not working at all. So for me, the main question is, can I tell at least, let's say the people 50 plus, for example, is there a certain health, like a flow? If you're 20, I guess you're in a different situation than if you are 40, than if you are 50 or 50 plus. So if I ask the older people, and let's talk about the 50 plus generation, are there things where you would say, these are your enemies? Don't eat that, don't do it. Or are there other things where you would say, eat it, do it, these are your friends? Because sometimes it's very easy to say, okay, this is an enemy, and this is a friend, and this is very easy to communicate. So with your experience and all the science background, is it possible to say, use these things and avoid those things?
I think we can issue quite clear recommendations, things to do you should do and things that you shouldn't. And to answer your implicit question, it's really the difference between successful aging, which is slow aging, and unsuccessful aging, which is rapid aging. Now, I'm 72 now, and I'm still in pretty good health. But I see people who are much younger than I am, who are actually in far worse health than I. So for example, the year that graduated 2 years behind me in an Alabama college that I know quite well, I think approximately more than a third of them are dead now. And of the survivors, every single one has a chronic degenerative condition. Alabama, within the United States, has a reputation. It's in the heart attack belt, it's in the kidney disease belt, it's in the obesity belt. The southern style of eating is not the healthiest. And that accelerates the rate at which their bodies decay and wear out and die. What I and my colleagues have been trying to do is to look at the different factors that are involved in driving these so-called diseases of civilization, to see whether we can identify some relatively simple drivers of disease. We call them diseases of civilization. And actually that's not very helpful, because if these lifestyle conditions are caused by civilization, how can we avoid them? Do we have to leave civilization behind? Do we have to leave München or Berlin and go and live in the fields and catch fish with our hands from the streams? That's something that not many people would be willing to do. And so I think it's important to try to be more detailed, more granular, and to peer behind this curtain of lifestyle and dietary factors to attempt at least to identify what is those factors that are actually making you more at risk of disease. And I think we've identified 4. It's a little bit simplified, but it seems to be very effective when we turn it into praxis. So these 4 drivers of disease are chronic inflammatory stress, which I think a lot of doctors know something about, a lot of people know about, because it's had publicity. And that is a complicated process, which at the end of the process leads to the disorganization and breakdown of healthy tissue. And that's one of the hallmarks of chronic degenerative disease. And that's bad enough. But at the same time, because we're eating a terribly unnatural diet, a lot of ultra-processed foods, which are empty calories, many of the key, essentially important nutrients have been taken away and replaced by others which are very unhealthy. So we end up with something called type B malnutrition, which means that we're not deficient but low in very many vitamins and minerals and fatty acids and different types of fibers, many other things. And many of these factors are involved in repairing tissue. So on the one hand, you have chronic inflammation, which is increasing the destruction of healthy tissue. At the same time, our ability to repair it has been degraded. And it makes everything worse. It means that the decay of tissue, whether it's bone or cartilage, or your linings of your arteries or your brain cells, is accelerated. And this is what forms a large part of most people's experience of aging. That is unsuccessful aging. If that was all that the modern diet and lifestyle created, that would already be very serious. But there's two more things, major problems that are caused by the modern diet and lifestyle. And one is dysbiosis. So the modern diet has removed very large amounts of a particular type of fiber called prebiotic, which means that the population of microbes inside the large intestine, the dickdarm, is completely skewed. And it's skewed in a way which puts us at risk. It damages the intestines and causes secondary damage in many other tissues, including the liver, the brain, the placenta. I mean, Hippocrates, I believe, said that all disease starts in the intestines and with your diet. And then he was, in many respects, correct. And I think what has happened is, over the last 20 years or so, many scientists have revisited that concept, and we've come to understand in more detail the complexity of the microbiome and its importance and the way in which it is damaged or degraded by the modern diet. And then the fourth major driver of disease is something that we call glycemic mismatch. That is caused by a diet which has got lots of sugars and digestible carbohydrates, so you're pouring lots of sugar, glucose, into the bloodstream. And at the same time, we are physically very inactive compared to our ancestors. And so that glucose in the bloodstream is not absorbed and taken up into the muscles and used for physical energy anymore. So it accumulates in the blood, and so you move towards insulin resistance, hyperglycemia, metabolic syndrome, and then all the problems associated with that. So now we have just four major drivers of disease, which probably account for, between them, maybe between 80, 90, perhaps even, let's say 90% of all of the chronic degenerative diseases that disfigure the current public health landscape. Now we are in a position to be able to make clear recommendations. You don't have to leave civilization behind. All you have to do is to damp chronic inflammatory stress, take a very broad-based program of vitamins and minerals and phytonutrients, which will restore your levels to the levels that we found in, for example, the populations who lived 150 years ago, or vestigial groups who live in a very traditional way in certain remote parts of the world. And that already we've neutralized 2 out of the 4 drivers of disease. Dysbiosis we can rectify very easily by increasing our intake of different types of prebiotic fibers. That restores a much, much older and more traditional microbiota in the intestines. And then for the 4th driver, glycemic mismatch, well, I mean, a lot of scientists who work with, for example, diabetes have shown that if you reduce your intake of sugars and digestible carbohydrates and take more physical exercise, you can cure diabetes. And then all the risks that come along with that disappear as well. This is not controversial. This is new. This has been known for a long time. What if we do all of those 4 things? Well, that's what we do in our program. We neutralize each one of those 4 drivers of chronic degenerative disease. And when we do, we're putting your metabolism in a time machine and sending it back in time, 150 years or so, to a time before the food environment that we see today existed. There were no ultra-processed foods. There were processed foods, simple processed foods such as bread and butter. They're processed. But the ultra-processed foods that now occupy 50, in some countries 60% of all the calories that are eaten, did not exist. By using these 4 countermeasures, we're sending you back to a time before our diet became so disastrously out of balance. When that happens, your body can then once again function as it was designed to do. And at that point, you move from this track of unsuccessful, accelerated aging to a very slower version. It's not immortality or anything like that. There are American scientists who are searching for immortality, which I think would be a terrible thing if we were to find it. It would be Pandora's box. There are many people high up in the elites. I'm very grateful for mortality, thank God. And I think that when you look at the Silicon Valley personnel who are pursuing this holy grail, it's clear that they're doing it from a very toxic mixture of vanity and self-importance and neurosis. I'm not interested in that at all, although the science is interesting. What I'm interested in is getting the basics right.
So, if you would be the health minister of a country,
That's a dreadful thought.
Yeah, I'm sorry for that, especially in Germany, to be honest. But some people might support you right away, like me. But I mean, what you tell me is that public health is theoretically easy to get into a better shape.
Really, it's quite easy. And the obstacles between where we are now and better health are not technical any longer. They're political, they're economic.
And that's why I'm asking, how many politicians, health ministers, do support these facts? I mean, are there worldwide, or are there countries where you would say, okay, these countries are, at least they are, thinking about it, doing some teaching or whatever?
Yes, there are. But this is a very contentious point, because the only countries that are starting to look at this very seriously are those countries that have really an interest in the public health of their citizenry. So you have to exclude the United States and its vassal states. The vassal nations are not interested at all, because in our countries the politicians are largely owned by regulators and lobbyists and various industrial interests. They would not be able to go down this road.
With regards to kids' health care, because I guess most of the mistakes with regards to all the nutrition and all these things, most of the mistakes are done in your youth, and from your parents actually, or in school, because in Germany, for example, in school, nobody's teaching you what to eat, what not to eat, what to do, how you take care about your body, whatever. It's not existing. They learn mathematics and geography or whatever, but the even most important thing it's not there. It's not on the schedule. Are there things like key sentences where you would say, okay, if you do this and this and this, you improve?
Absolutely. I mean, the very simple, where do we start? The usual recommendations is don't smoke, don't drink too much, eat more fruit and vegetables, and less smoked foods and cured meats. Those are the typical things that...
That's so far so true.
That's true up to a point, but that will, I mean, if you're in a 100-mile race, that will take you maybe to the 30-mile post.
Okay.
But I'm interested in taking this further. Can we go further than that?
Me too.
And it's very clear that we can. The next thing that I would say is don't eat ultra-processed foods. No matter how delicious they are, they're designed to be delicious. They're designed to be addictive, very deliberately. They're designed to be addictive. And learn how to cook with basic produce.
How come that... I forgot one thing. Light products are no products. Okay? Is a light product a dangerous product? The typical light, aspartame, whatever product is not a good product. This is one thing, and I guess you agree, do you?
Not entirely.
Okay. Happy to hear. I'm a little bit hoping that there's some solution for me.
I think that an excessive intake of a diet with an excessive glycemic index has been shown in many, many studies to increase the risk of a number of very serious health conditions. An excessive glycemic load, not quite so bad, but still not particularly good for you either. I think that we eat far too much sugar, and both in confectionaries and in baked goods, but it's also present in many other foods as well. And then if you can switch from that to using some of the low or zero calorie sweeteners, are they completely 100% safe? Well, perhaps not, but we know how dangerous, how unhealthy large amounts of sugar are for you. I think that the low and zero calorie sweeteners have a valuable role to play as substitutes.
When I ask around about this whole issue, I found out that a lot of people my age have a serious, like an addiction or something going on in their body which they cannot explain, and this goes like this: you have food, you eat lunch or dinner or whatever, and 5 minutes after you stopped, you want to have some sugar, you want to have some sweet stuff, some dessert. How come? Is it an addiction? People told me it feels like when I was on cocaine in the 80s. I want to have more of that stuff. Is there something like that going on in the body?
Well, I can't tell because I didn't take cocaine in the 80s.
Oh, okay.
That's not a good example for
I
me.
did, I'm sorry.
No, I was doing other things.
Yeah.
I think that some of that is conditioned. How many children are taught, you do something good, here,
Yeah.
have some chocolate. And so there is a psychological element in this. You
So
do something good, I want a reward,
Yeah.
here's something sweet.
Yeah.
So we associate those sweet tastes with a feeling of either being rewarded by someone else or rewarding ourselves. And that's, I think, very unhealthy. So one thing that parents could do is to perhaps not use chocolate or other forms of confectionery as a reward for good behavior. That's setting up, I think, unhealthy behavioral patterns, which won't be good for their children as they go through life. Instead, give them a nice piece of broccoli.
Yeah.
You can see that's not going to work.
No, it's not working.
But, you know, a piece of fruit, for example, which also contains some sugars. Of course, the nutritionists and the purists will remind us of that, but in a more dilute form.
Yeah.
And it's, rather than taking fruit juice, but then if you eat the whole fruit, the glucose is spread over a rather longer period of time. That doesn't appear to be so addictive. But I want to go back to this idea of ultra-processed foods being marketed to us as addictive substances. They're designed in such a way to make them as addictive as possible. The food companies who make them know this. They use techniques and scientists to help them to make them as addictive as possible. That's how they gain market share. And if one company starts to do it, every other company has to do the same, otherwise they lose out. So you have now a food environment which contains large amounts of these ultra-processed foods, which are very difficult for people to stop once they start consuming. So those, it's a technology that's known as bliss point technology, and the food is tinkered with. Its different constituents are altered, the fats, the sugars, the crunch, the mouthfeel, until it gets to a point where you, the consumer, find it very difficult to resist. And there are more and more papers being published now about the addictive nature of these foods. I think that is no longer an argument. When this first started, there was a considerable amount of debate. And people said, well, how can a food be addictive? Because you have to eat. Well, you don't have to eat these foods, but people do eat them, and they eat them in large amounts, and they eat more of them than they need. The problem is becoming very apparent because there is more and more research that shows that the more of these foods you eat, the more you're likely to die, the more likely you are to develop a serious lifestyle condition. And that work has been done in Brazil, it's being done in France, in the United States. There's an international body of research now that shows how toxic these foods are. And I use the word toxic very deliberately. This is almost like the situation that we had with smoking until Everett Koopes, the American Surgeon General, published his landmark report about the dangers of smoking.
Yeah.
And then you had, these wonderful scientists, English scientists, Pito and Dahl, who looked at the statistics and crunched the numbers and said, yeah, smoking tobacco does make you more at risk of a number of, lung cancer and heart disease and all the rest of it. And those statistics were relatively easy. They were very complicated, but relatively easily because you have two groups. You have smokers and non-smokers. Well, when you have health problems associated with food, you have eaters, and then you have more eaters. Everybody has to eat.
Yeah.
And everybody is eating slightly different combinations of foods, depending on where they live, what they have access to, how much discretionary spending they can afford, and what is being marketed locally. So it's a very complex situation. Despite that, a lot of research has now shown that the more of these foods you eat, the more you die. We have moved so far away from our nutritional origins in a very short period of time, a period of time that is so short that our genetic and our metabolic profiles have not changed. So here we are, we're still hunters and gatherers, and we're eating a diet that is industrial. We're not eating food anymore, we're eating kibble.
Yeah.
It's like, our cats and dogs at home that we feed these pellets to. Is that real food? No, it's not. And yet that's what we eat.
And all this creates this, what is in English, chronic inflammation, is that correct?
Well, it causes chronic inflammation,
Yeah.
but chronic degenerative disease. I think we can say that we can put this in a stronger way.
Yeah.
Chronic inflammation and all the other problems that I talked about lead to chronic degenerative disease.
What I did is I did a test, and a couple of people I know did the same test as well, and we found out we had a certain rate. The rate involves 1 to 16. That's where I ended up.
Right.
And I tried to get some information about it and what I can do to improve the situation. What would you say, and also again as a very easy recipe, what can I do to bring this down? Because there is an opportunity to measure it, which is great. I guess with regards to food, it's very hard to measure things.
Yeah.
Is it healthy or not healthy? What I do now, I don't know. It's not a easy to do process. But this blood test was an easy to do process, and I had a result on the desk, and I want to improve that result. What can I do?
Well, it's very, very simple. First of all, what does it measure? It's measuring the levels of different fatty acids in your blood, and the importance of that is that gives us an idea of how likely you are to develop chronic inflammation. Everybody knows chronic inflammation is a bad thing. Now, if you have a ratio that's much above 5 to 1, 6s to 3s, you are likely to have chronic inflammation. And the higher the ratio, the more inflammation you will have, and the more likely you are over time to develop one of the diseases of civilization, lifestyle conditions, call them what you will.
Yeah.
If that was all that there was to this story, that would be highly irresponsible to market such a test, because we're showing people, hey, you're at risk, so goodbye.
Yeah.
What is the poor person going to do about it? They're left in a state of unhappiness and panic and despair, and they don't know how to get out of trouble. Well, there is a lot of evidence that shows that if you eat fish, and particularly oily fish, cold water fish, so herring, mackerel, Manhattan fish like that, sardines, pilchards, they contain not just the omega-3s, which the supplement industry sells, but also some very, very important amphiphilic polyphenols. These are other compounds. The protection that this kind of diet gives you, it is composed of 2 ingredients. And because the supplement industry thinks like a pharmaceutical company, they thought it's got to be one thing, one specific thing. So they took out the omega-3s, forgetting or not knowing that the protection was a binary system. And by taking only one thing out, they were half right but completely wrong. That's why fish oil doesn't work.
I guess it's just a very marketing-driven decision, and nobody gives a shit about what's going on, what's happening afterwards. They just sell stuff.
Not really.
Or are they just wrong?
No. The fish oil companies. I've talked to some of very senior people in the fish oil companies. They know what they sell has no effect, but it's good business. But
they sell.
Yeah, of course they do. It's good business.
Yeah.
But if you look at, for example, the Cochrane collaboration, and these are an international group of very senior scientific figures who I respect. They have done so many studies that show fish oil, commercial fish oil, has no effect. It doesn't do anything. And yet eating oily fish is really protective. So how could that be? And their answer is there's a difference between oily fish and fish oil. Oily fish also contain these polyphenols. It's the combination of the polyphenols and the omega-3s that are so protective. And so you can either eat oily fish, or if you don't like herring or mackerel, I mean I do, but if you don't, then a combination of fish oil and I would say pre-mature olive oil with a high polyphenol content. Olives are the only other source of these types of polyphenols. So by mixing olive oil and fish oil together, commercial fish oil, you end up with something that is the equivalent of an oily fish, but in liquid form. So if you don't, like, taking out fish bones, and if you don't like the taste of fish, and if you're worried about mercury or things like that, then this is an alternative way of doing it and damping chronic inflammatory stress.
And this is a natural product?
Yes,
it's not
completely.
existing in, created by a company?
No. I mean, there are, I think, a couple of companies that are marketing this, but the ingredients are completely natural.
Yeah. And last week we have a German magazine called Der Spiegel, and they had a big title story about dietary supplements. The final sentence is all crap.
I agree. I agree.
You agree?
Yes, of course. I really don't like the supplement industry. Most of what they sell is completely useless. It has a talismanic value, but no health-related value at all. And I find them irresponsible and actually, frankly, unethical.
So if I go to, or if somebody analyzes my blood or my body, and he gives me a list of things missing today, like kalium, for example, or whatever, So there are reasons for that it is missing. Does it make sense? I mean, if calcium is missing, it makes sense to take calcium, right?
No.
Or doesn't make no sense?
No, not really. Because again, you're thinking like a pharmaceutical company. And you're thinking, well, it's got to be this one thing.
Yeah.
It's very rare that people will have a problem just with calcium.
Okay.
I mean, yes, if you take certain drugs, for example, certain loop diuretics, you're probably going to be very low in calcium.
Yeah.
But for most people, they're actually not just low in potassium, but they're actually going to have a very extended pattern of depletion in their bodies. So you'll find that they're low in all the vitamins, in most of the minerals, in a whole range of phytonutrients. They're low in everything. The one thing that they're not low in is calories. True. Because the ultra-processed foods give you calories, lots of calories, but very little of the cofactors that our body needs in order to function properly.
So that means these millions and millions of euros or dollars invested in dietary supplements, they are perhaps good for your individual brain because you think you did something good to yourself, but at the end, bottom line...
It's the modern equivalent of carrying around a splinter of the one true cross in your pocket, or a bone of the saints, the bones of the saints.
Yeah.
You know, our medieval ancestors used to carry around with them to ward off evil spirits. Taking supplements today is the modern equivalent of that. So I don't like the supplement industry. I don't particularly like the pharmaceutical industry either, although I accept that there will always be a role for pharmaceuticals in acute management. That's what modern medicine is good at. Emergency medicine and the acute management of symptoms, but it has been hopeless at preventing the gradual worsening of public health that we have seen for the last 3/4 of a century.
So for me, if I see the big picture, doesn't the pharmaceutical industry, what is their opportunity for the future? For me, in having read this book and listening to what you say, and comparing this industry with other industries, for me that would mean that they should definitely do a contract with you and change their...
Do you mean take out a contract on me?
Yeah, something like that. Because let's say the car vehicle industry, what did they do when some new kinds of engines came up? They bought it and put it away and keep on producing what they do. So what is the future? I guess there is really medicine necessary for some things happening, and this is a business, and there should be a business, and it's development and science and whatever, it belongs together. But during Corona, for example, and I'm not 80 million Germans said I'm an expert in Corona now, and they're using all these vocabularies and whatever. Not me. I said I have no idea. But what I learned during this period is that neither the pharmaceutical industry nor the health politicians, and I'm sorry to say, not even doctors I know the truth. They are all like developing, thinking, whatever. But what changed compared to the past is that all of them went out, big mouth, and we have the solution. My wife, she's not a doctor. My wife said, I guess all this stuff which has to do with cold, and it happens somewhere here. So what we do is 3 times a day, we take some stuff and do it like this, and this might help us.
Ah, you're an expert, I see.
Yeah, my wife is, because she forced us to do that. And we didn't have anything. Then, in year 2 of Corona, we all of us had Corona. We would not have even realized that we had Corona, but we had to do this test, and that's what we found out, we had Corona. The symptoms were like, okay, we had a cold, and it was a little bit different from other colds because we had one day headache, the other day we had like something in here, and then we were coughing a little bit the third day, and after a week, that was pretty much it. Saying that, I guess perhaps we did the right thing. and seeing the results afterwards, and today, and reading all, now science coming up and telling other stories, I wonder, where's the pharmaceutical industry moving to after that? Because I guess that it might have changed the view from average people to a certain industry, which brings me also to this issue, because it's the same in dietary supplements, and then you have something like this.
No, you're right. And I think that the grotesque mishandling of COVID by governments all around the world has led to a substantial erosion of trust by from the public in the medical profession and in the regulatory bodies. They've been seen to be wanting. They've been behind the curve. And I think the government responses to COVID are actually more harmful than helpful. I would describe it as public health malpractice. Mm-hmm. And people, I think, are now much more questioning of medical authority. And this has created a situation where I believe that more people are now think that it's important to start taking care of themselves, to think more in terms of preventative health or health maintenance, mm-hmm. rather than waiting for something to go wrong and then throwing yourself on the not particularly tender mercies of a medical profession that is largely owned, in some cases conceptually and in some cases financially, by the pharmaceutical industry. This is an opportunity, I think, for those who have an interest in nutrition, who are working commercially or scientifically in this space. But I would make a more general point. They're clearly going through a period of intense political and economic turbulence. Some people refer to this as the fourth turning. You've heard that phrase. Yeah. And what is quite clear now is that we're undergoing a transition that is perhaps as important, as major as the one that we saw between the late medieval period and the Renaissance. A change which is being held back by stakeholders in the institutions which are currently dominant. Mm-hmm. Now, many of those institutions, not just medical ones, but economic and political ones, have their roots, their origins in the late 19th century. And they clearly are no longer fit for purpose. They do not serve us well at all. They're actually quite destructive. And the problem that we have is in managing their decline and moving through to some new kind of model. The people who own, for example, healthcare, the medical insurance companies, the pharmaceutical companies, don't want to change. They will hold on to what they have as long as they can. That's how they make their money. I understand that. But they'll be swept away. I can see a future, a near future, if we survive this transition, where the models of healthcare will no longer be pharmacocentric, but then they will no longer be vertical. They will be horizontal. They will be based on pharmaconutrition. And they won't even be delivered from a hospital or doctor's surgery. They will be delivered at the supermarket. Or through direct marketing companies.
If I would have a company with 6,000, 10,000, 12,000 employees today, I would realize, like everybody is realizing these days, a lot of people are sick quite often. If I have something like this in my hand as a boss of a company with many people, I would, and taking into consideration what you just said, I would say, okay, the people who work in my company, they should profit on that idea, because at the end I will profit because they will be more healthy. And in my restaurant, in my company restaurant, I would have an extra portion of these kind of oil, for example. I would have healthy nutrition. I would also offer the other stuff and the burgers, because I don't want, I don't want to force people and push people, but I guess it is absolutely 100% the best mechanism to change the situation between the pharmaceutical industry and sick people and diseases and whatever is going on in the places where people work. And they should take, as a company owner, I should take care about it, should I?
Particularly if you have high value employees.
Yeah.
And I can tell you now that increasingly companies are talking to us exactly about this. And we, one hospital, for example, and I can't even tell you which one or where it is, but all the staff in the hospital are now taking these programs.
Yeah.
And they have seen a dramatic reduction in the numbers of staff who become ill and have to cease work. So for them, it's been extremely worthwhile. It's made complete economic sense. I can tell you that one of the most famous professional football teams in the world is using this program, and when you look at what's happening to them professionally, you can see that they're doing phenomenally well because their players don't get injured, they don't get sick, they have more time to play together and learn each other's skills as a team, and the whole team then becomes more successful. So for those people who are in industry or in perhaps one of the high-level sporting areas, an investment of this sort, the return on investment is extraordinarily high. At the moment, it's only a relatively small number of people who have looked at the data and who've made these decisions. But the interesting thing is, for example, in sports, which are very competitive, when the managers of other teams see, well, hang on, what's going on with this team? How are they doing this so well? How is it that their players just don't get sick and they don't get injured? And then the word gets out, and then they start to use it. So this is already happening.
So I need to know this club because Hamburg, the Hamburger Sportverein, for the 5th time now, they stay in League 2, and they were not able to go up to League 1. So we need your support.
Introduce me to their trainer and the managers, and I'll help you get them into the first division.
Yeah, promise. So I guess I'm very thankful that you took your time. For me, what is thrilling, it was inspiring, and I would really love to do it again. And I promise that next time I will have more sharp questions. And I try to be not just a little boy asking questions because I'm very interested in the things.
No, you should be aggressive in your questioning. You should challenge what I say. I really believe in the dialectic of science. Yeah. That is the only way that science can progress. If you simply tell me, oh, I agree with everything you say, for me, that's useless. I don't learn anything from that. The more you challenge me, the more I appreciate it.
Okay, next time perhaps, but I fear it will not that much of critics because I read this book, and what I want to say is to people, this book is in you can just order it at Amazon or wherever. It is a fantastic book. A lot of things you just mentioned are in here, in of course on more pages. The most interesting thing these days is, for me, just kidding a little bit, but the last 44 pages are just references. And I tell you, in these times when everybody is, shouting out messages and having no reference at all on one hand. On the other hand, if you have a message, everybody what is the source, where you got it from? This book, on one hand, it's a very good read. And I really loved it. And I prefer fiction, but this one is a very, very good one. And I love it very much. And thank you very much for that I at least had the chance to read it. But the most important thing is, at the end of the book, you have 44 pages with just references. And references, I guess this is what really missing these days, that people also, and that's what you just said, learning from each other, looking what other people do, thinking about it, and taking into your own life and juggling it around and trying to find a solution. And so what I would advise everybody, and let me just say it in German, Freunde, lest euch rein in dieses Buch, hört darüber und probiert zu verstehen, was wir gesprochen haben, und hört euch an, was Paul Clayton zu sagen hat, weil es vielleicht ganz einfach ist, sein eigenes Leben ein bisschen zu verbessern und gesund alt zu werden. Und darum geht es tatsächlich. Thank you very much for your time.
No, you're so
And
welcome.
I hope I see you again.
I'll come back.
Yeah, great. And I connect you to the Hamburger Football Club, HSV. There we go.
Well, I make a prediction. If we can really form a collaboration, then you'll see the team making progress.
Okay.
I guarantee it.
We do a clip out of just that, and I have personal connections to the club. I will take care. Promise.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you.